Hey guys, this is Coach Goodrich with another history podcast. This one is designed for my sixth graders, Heritage Studies, Ancient Civ, Cultural Geography class. This is going to be the first of two parts. This is Unit 2, Egypt and Israel. First part's going to be over ancient Egyptian history. Second part is going to be over ancient Israeli history. So here we go. The wise essential questions. Please make sure you have your Unit 2 notes out so you can copy down, fill in the blanks, and copy down the essential questions. What are the differences between the Egyptian religion and Christianity? And then what happened to Israel after Solomon's death? So go ahead and pause the video and you guys can write those down. Alright, so first part. This is part one. Going to be doing all of ancient Egypt. So here we go. Gift of the Nile, referred to in the ancient times as Mizraim. It was named after the grandson of Noah, who was the first one to settle in that land. Mizraim was the son of Ham. We know that Ham went to Africa. Nile River is the most notable feature as it is the longest river in the world, 4,500 miles from top to bottom. It's also one of the few rivers in the world that actually flows kind of backwards. It flows from the bottom all the way up to the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile is the main reason for the longevity, the length of the Egyptian civilization, because it provided water, irrigation for crops, water for silt, to help also with crops, water for bathing, travel, trade. Well, you need to have a good water source, as we've talked about, whether it's in Mesopotamia or in Egypt or in any one of the other ancient civilizations that we're going to talk about, in order for that civilization to grow. The silt from the annual flooding of the Nile allows the soil to remain fertile, providing a bountiful and pretty well-planned harvest for every year. The Nile was even going to be used for taxes based on how high the water level was. If the water level was high, meaning that the crops were going to grow very, very well that year, the taxes were going to be higher, a higher percentage. If it was not a good year and the Nile was a little bit lower, maybe because of droughts, the crops were not going to grow as well, so the taxes would be lowered. There you go. So that's one of the mouths of the Nile River. This will be found in the top part of Egypt up here, which is called the Delta, this little fan-shaped region. Actually, there's a bunch of little rivers and tributaries that flow in the Mediterranean. And you can see how far it is. It goes through the entire side of the western half of Egypt. Also going to talk a little bit about Kush, sometimes spelled with a C, sometimes with a K. It depends on the translation, but it's the same kind of place. There we go. Lake Nasser down in the bottom. One of the biggest lakes in Africa, and the Mediterranean Sea towards the top. Sahara Desert, really just called the Sahara because Sahara is the word for desert in that Bantu language. If you look right here, you can tell it's a desert because there's nothing green there. So, and we're going to get into, eventually get into Palestine and Jerusalem, Israel, Judea, Samaria, Galilee, once we get there eventually. Here we go. Old Kingdom. All right, Old Kingdom was the first major dynasty in Egyptian history. It's actually its third dynasty, but this is the one where it kind of came to national prominence or international prominence for about 500 years, from 2700 to 2200 BC, before the time of Christ. It is going to be known for pyramids. In fact, it's known as the Age of Pyramids. A lot of the big pyramids that Egypt is still famous for, and monuments are going to be built during this time, like the Great Pyramids found at Giza, which are going to be built by the pharaoh Khufu. Ancient pyramids of Giza were built to reflect the constellations at a certain time of year. This is going to be used by other civilizations like the Mayans and Aztecs as well, and it's one of the weird connections between those two groups of people that never had any contact with each other. And there you go. So in the Greek mythology, this fellow right here is Orion. So you see the Orion's belt, and if you look at it at a certain time of year, the stars kind of align right above it. There you go. So in the Egyptian faith, the stars are called Mentaka, Analam, and Anatak, three great pyramids of Egypt, Menakre, Khafre, and Cheops. And then in Teotihuacan, one of the major cities of the Aztec faith, Pyramid of the Moon, Pyramid of the Sun, and the Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. So just interesting, and a weird connection between the two cultures. So, okay, so I'm going to abbreviate okay for Old Kingdom, that's fine. The Sphinx came around this time, pyramid. The Great Pyramid, this is pyramid built specifically for Khufu as his final resting place. Came from this time period. Have some videos for you guys to watch after this as well. Give you guys a look at what it looks like inside. So you have these above ground tombs. They're going to be start off and they're going to be dug into the earth. But we got mummification. Thanks to the vigorous preservation methods practiced by the Egyptians, archaeologists have a great historical records for study. They embalmer would dress up like Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the afterlife. Then they would remove the brain through the nose, take out the organs to dry, and place them in canopic jars. I have a couple really cool reading activities and worksheets for you guys to kind of break this down step by step. Then the body would be filled with spices and soaked in natron, which is a saltwater solution, for up to 70 days, kind of brine and dry out the skin, keep it from decomposing. After the soaking, body would be washed and wrapped in linen strips and placed in several coffins, usually made of wood at the base, and then finally placed in a metal or stone sarcophagus, a fancy coffin cover. There we go. So this would be an example of the sarcophagus right here. This one not super fancy, but has a face painted on it. This is what the mummy looks like with just the wrappings on it. There you go. And this is a mummy preserved in one of the museums in I believe it's in Cairo, the Museum of Antiquities there. But you see how dried out the skin is, but pretty well preserved. Kind of looks like a zombie. And then this is a representation of the mummification, the embalming process right here with the jackal head. Each one of the major organs, according to the Egyptian religion, would be placed in one of these canopic jars, which you guys talked about. And obviously the guy laying down is the guy being embalmed right now. Oh, this is a fun one. Yes, it's actually a maze, but it's a cool picture. So they would break off this little piece of your nose. They could reach in here with a hook and pull your brain out, which isn't going to be discarded because it was not considered important. And then a close-up of some of the canopic jars. There you go. So you got the sarcophagus, and then you see the wooden kind of lining in it, and then you have the linen-wrapped mummy itself. Middle Kingdom, from 204 to 1783 BC. We're good. Was a period of peace and stability, traded with neighbors, built pyramids with mud bricks, not stone, so they're not going to last nearly as long, which is why we don't have so many of them laying around. I'll show you guys a couple, or at least one example of what they look like, and then a couple more through the readings, but not necessarily known for their pyramids or buildings. Eventually they're going to be conquered by a people group known as the Hyksos. So this Middle Kingdom, this is the Black Pyramid of Dashur with the town of Dashur behind it. Right now you can see it really just looks like a rock or a form of mountain that's kind of breaking down. Not the best looking and definitely not the most longest lasting of the pyramids. All right, this is I showed you guys this one because I want to talk to you guys about ancient artwork. So in ancient artwork, size indicates importance. So the bigger a person is in a painting or in a piece of art, the more important or influential that person was. So this is going to be your pharaoh right here. And the pharaoh and his horse are bigger than all of these other people, so which signifies his importance as the pharaoh. It's an easy way to kind of break down what you're looking at when you're looking at a piece of art. Size usually indicates importance. And finally, you got the New Kingdom from 1570 to 1075 BC. Prince Ahmose drove out the Hyksos, which had taken over. This was the most famous part of Egyptian history, made Egypt a world power, respected around the world. You're going to have a lot of warrior kings that are going to work towards expanding the kingdom of Egypt, trying to take over certain places around them, make themselves as large and powerful as possible. People like the first woman pharaoh, Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Ramses II, which according to most scholars is the biblical Ramses, and then of course King Tut, Tutankhamun, are all from this period. So you have Hatshepsut's temple, and it's kind of hard to see down here on the left, but you can see these people walking down. There's a couple others that give you a size of how large this temple was. And then the great temple at Abu Simbel, which has different faces of Ramses carved up here in order to protect it. The last empire we talk about in Egypt is really not even Egyptians. we have the Cushites, sometimes spelled with a C, sometimes with a K, but they're going to come from the lower half of Egypt and modern-day Sudan. In 1000 BC, the Cushites are going to conquer Egypt, and they're going to eventually be driven out by the Aksums or Aksumite Empire from Ethiopia. They're going to control Egypt and kind of borrow from their culture a lot, and you're going to see a lot of similarities. They had their capital in Meroe in modern-day Sudan. They're going to trade ivory, gold, iron, and other items, and they're going to kind of be in power before being forced back and finally being destroyed, like I said earlier, by the Aksumites in AD 330. So sometimes these are going to be known as the Black Pharaohs or the African Pharaohs because they're going to look like traditional Africans in that sense. And you can see their pyramids here where their bodies are much smaller but kind of follows the same design. The religion of the Egyptians, one of the more fascinating things that we get to talk about. And we got 4 minutes to do it. Here we go. Polytheistic. Obviously, polytheistic we know means many gods. One god for each city and each village. You have hundreds of those, so you're going to have hundreds of gods. Their main god of the Old Kingdom time period was Ra, the sun god. During the Middle Kingdom, the priests are going to join their main god, Amen, to Ra, to great Amen-Ra, which is going to kind of take over the mantle as being the most important. Some other important gods are Osiris of the underworld, Anubis, who judged the dead and kind of guardian of the afterlife, Isis, the protector of children, Horus, the god of the pharaohs, and Hathor, the goddess of love. Now, obviously, that is not an extensive list, but it gives you some idea of what we're talking about. The ones that you guys are going to have to know for your test specifically are Amun-Ra right here. He's got the big tall hat, making him bigger than everybody else. Size equals importance. He's the most important. You have Osiris. We're going to read a couple legends about him, but he looks like a mummy. Kind of signifies his importance as the ruler of the afterlife. And then Anubis, the guy who is in charge of sending people into the afterlife through embalming and mummification. So we'll talk about each of these guys coming up too as well. And here you go, your mini quiz. This is one that's going to be graded either through our Google Classroom or physically. Haven't quite decided yet how we're going to do that, but I will let you know. So make sure you answer these questions right here, and I look forward to reading all about it. Thanks, guys, and talk to you guys soon.